So welcome, folks, as you are coming in. Each week you have tuned in, and there have been a wide range of different rabbis. And tonight you are having the honor of getting to enjoy some learning with myself. I'm Rabbi Michael Birnholz from Temple Beth Shalom in Vero Beach, Florida. As of now, I will become the rabbi at Temple B'nai Israel in Clearwater, Florida, over the summer. And I am joined by my esteemed colleague.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Lauren Ben-Shoshan. I live up in the Tahoe basin, specifically in Turkey in California. And we are part of the Tahoe Jewish community, which is a consortium of micro communities and two synagogues, North Tahoe Hebrew Congregation and also Temple Bat Yam in South Lake Tahoe.
So welcome, everyone. It is wonderful that you are with us. What I just posted into the chat, if you are interested, is I just put the link to the playlist of all the other sessions. So if you have missed a session or want to go back and rewatch a session, you will have the opportunity to do that through that playlist that is on YouTube. And feel free to share it if you have other folks that you think would appreciate being able to see this, be part of this program, to see these different teachings on the Midot of the Omer. Please feel free to share that playlist. It is wonderful to be able to make these connections. So this is a program called a URJ Rabbi Small Congregation Team Up. And I am one of the organizers of these team up programs. It has been wonderful. We have programs from Tisha B'Av to Purim. We've had programs through teaching Ecclesiastes on Sukkot. It is rabbis from small congregations just banding together so that we're able to share a wider range of programs with our congregants and learn with each other and from each other. And I've actually gotten to know a number of my colleagues and really developed some amazing friendships just by picking a random week during one of these programs and saying, hey, will you teach with me? And so this is the first time that Rabbi Ben-Shoshan and I have the opportunity to meet and teach together, and it is wonderful to start our partnership and friendship that way. So welcome, everyone, and welcome to this night of the Omer. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Please feel free to leave your camera on. Please feel free to use the chat. If you have a question, you can either use the raise hand function or you can use the chat, and we will try to keep our eye on that because our hope is that not only do we get to teach, but we have the opportunity to interact with you all and get some feedback from you and give you a chance to process this incredible midah of Yesod, which has to do with foundation.
And I just wanted to add one more quick note. We are so lucky to have Rabbi Birnholz organize all of these activities for us across the nation. This wouldn't happen without him and without his initiative, and we are so grateful.
And one last, remember that as we finish on June 11th, there will be a small congregation team up Leil Tavut, Tikkun Leil Shavuot. We'll see how grounded I am tonight. Tikkun Leil Shavuot. So there will be from 8 p.m. Eastern all the way to, I think, 9 a.m. Pacific. There will be classes all through the night. 1, 2, 3, 4 rabbis teaching different classes. I will see. I don't think I have I will try to see if I can find the registration for that to put into the chat tonight. But we will see what I can do to send it out to everyone who is registered for this. And it's just a wonderful way to continue this learning. I know Rabbi Ben-Shoshan is going to be teaching a yoga program in the morning. I'm going to be teaching at night on about finding the burning bush, which is always an exciting prospect. And so we hope you'll continue to join us as you joined us for the Omer, but also to be able to join us for the celebration of Shavuot in that way. And so as we are gathering this evening, we are going to be talking about the midah of Yesod, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So we start with a blessing for...
Rabbi, would you lead our prayer to begin our study, to open up our study?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So together we say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We bless you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy through mitzvot and commands us to pay attention to the words of Torah.
Amen. And we have the opportunity to count the Omer tonight. And so we offer these words. I am now prepared to fulfill the positive mitzvah of the counting of the Omer, just as is written in the Torah. And from the day on which you bring the sheaf of the wave offering, the day after the day of rest, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete until the day after the 7th week. You should count 50 days. And those are instructions from Torah. And the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirot Omer. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us through mitzvot and commands us to count the Omer. And today is the 37th day, which is 5 weeks and 2 days into the Omer. As we are really starting to wrap up, we are into our 6th week of the Omer. And just a quick review, and on the chat, if you're able to, could you please indicate to us how many of these sessions that you have been to? Will be interesting to see if folks have been tuning in for 1 or 2 or all 6 so far. And so if you have been here from the beginning, you have seen chesed, loving kindness, gevurah, talking about strength, tiferet, beauty and balance, netzach, endurance, hod for splendor and humility. And tonight we are going to be talking about Yesod, that idea of foundation. And as I said, if you want to go back, I'm going to post it one more time in the chat. And you can get a chance to see the playlist that is on YouTube. So these are the midot that we have studied so far. And we are excited to be able to present Yesod. I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Ben-Shoshan.
So what is Yesod? It's not a Hebrew word that we use terribly, terribly often because it means foundation. So Yesod is the 42nd midah, and it means to be stable and rooted and grounded, literally foundation. If we're looking at a dictionary definition of how we should be thinking about this, approaching it, and what it might mean in our lives after we've created those kinds of definitions. It is a part of the 9th sefirot, which includes connection and communication, covenant and relationship, and also the regenerative organ. If we're thinking about where on that map of all the different sefirot, that is where it is located. So down at the center. But then the question became for us, as Rabbi and I were discussing, how do we incorporate the idea of foundation into our choices and our actions? Like, what does this actually mean for us within our lives, and how we interact with the world? How would the idea of Yesod inform what we do and the choices that we make? So one of the things that I always look for is for an example somewhere in the Torah or somewhere within Jewish literature, in order to try and grasp these kinds of discussions and try and understand how this has fit into somebody else's life and somebody else's generation, and then how that should fit within our lives and our generation. So we have here a story from the Zohar, specifically Noach, chapter 1, verses 7 through 9. And it says, so Noach begets generations. This is why these are the generations of Noach. This is to teach us that, like the covenant above, which is Yesod Atzilut, Noah bore everlasting generations because he merited the holy covenant, specifically the Noahide covenant, which we can talk about if anybody has any questions, and the Yesod of Atzilut, which is also called a covenant rests upon him. Noah was a righteous man. This is assuredly so, for his righteousness corresponds to the Yesod above. I'd like to take a quick time out here and point out that Noah was righteous, but not perfect. And that can be a discussion for later as well. This is why it is written, the righteous are the foundation, Hebrew Yesod, of the world. The earth is established upon him. He is the pillar that holds up the world. And what is Yesod? It is the righteous. Thus Noah is the righteous below among the souls. And hence it is written that Noah was a righteous man, to teach us that the world is maintained by him. And the secret of all that is revealed in the words Noah walked with Elohim, or God, which means to teach us that he never separated himself from God, and he merited being called a righteous man on earth, as did the supernal Yesod, the foundation of the world. He is the covenant of peace and the peace of the world, and thus he is called the man of the earth. And that is why the verse is written, Noah found favor in the eyes of Hashem. So the story of Noah, many of us know, right? God looks down upon the earth, and there are a lot of people who are not choosing great choices, as we would say to some of my kiddos. And as a result, Adonai decides to flood the earth. And then all of the resulting generations from there come from Noah himself. Now, it's a little controversial to occasionally think of Noah as he's not perfect, right? Like the first thing he does after all of that trauma is plant himself a grape field and then drink of those grapes. But he is nonetheless a righteous person. He chooses as many righteous choices as he possibly can. And so we use this example as foundation because Noah is doing his best, and all of the generations come out of him. And so we end up having this really interesting discussion about what does that mean within our own lives? What does it mean to try your best, not to expect perfection, but to try really hard to establish a foundation of righteousness within our own lives? So some of how we work to, Vero, Rabbi, you raised your hand?
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Can we go back for just 1 second?
Absolutely.
So just so everyone's familiar with that, they're highlighted, bolded quote is from Mishle, from Proverbs. And so it's taking that language that if Noah is a righteous man, it's connecting that to the idea of Yesod, of him being that pillar. And it's playing with two different things. One is that he is the Yesod, he is the source and the foundation of humanity, because he and his family survived the flood, and that he morally and ethically is the foundation going forward. Even in his imperfection, he was still a basis to move forward. The other thing can you go back one more slide? We got two different foundations here. So what is the picture in the background above the words? Does anyone know? It's just a fragment, but it's a pretty good foundation.
Anybody want to take a guess?
The Western Wall.
The Western Wall.
Right. So the Western Wall is the foundational wall for where the temple was, a plateau above that, the Temple of Jerusalem. And then if we go forward one slide, look at that pillar. I don't know if that's a flying buttress. It's some type of really pretty amazing architectural design, but look at the completely different kind of foundation. That one, you have a wall that's a retaining wall holding up a mountain, and here is this pillar that is holding up the ceiling in a completely different way of foundation. And so just like we're talking about Noah being that Yesod in two different ways, here you've got two different images. So as we talk about foundation and being grounded, just be open to some of those different components.
Perfect. Also, when you build foundations, depending on where you are at, sometimes you drive pillars down, or sometimes you create what we traditionally think of as like the square foundations. And, depending on the soil around you, one or the other might be more appropriate. And so how we think of the foundations that we establish for ourselves is also very dependent on what is happening around us. Right? It's a symbiotic relationship between the two. because we're tight on time, I wanted to suggest two different actions for you to take afterwards that help with self-reflection. One is an intuition exercise where you just ask yourself, you give yourself zero time to respond. Ask yourself what actions create a solid foundation for you and write it down. Don't think about it hard. What is the first thing that comes out? Intuition is one of those things, at least for me, that in my mind, it is all of your mind trying to gather up as much information quickly. And then later you can sort through why you might have said something the way that you said, but it gives you a quick instant survey of what's happening in your mind and your heart and tries to feed that on back forward. Intuition in my mind is something that, it's a great tool for us to use in the spiritual sense, especially when we're talking about Musar, because it does give us that very quick survey of what's happening. So that's an exercise for us to use when we talk about our what, like, what are we doing? What are we capable of? What needs deeper work? And then in order to do the deeper work, in order to do that exploration of our foundations, there's a 5 whys exercise. Now, the 5 depends on how honest you are with yourself in so many ways. In that I encourage people where if you feel like you weren't quite as honest with yourself as you might want to be, digging down for another why or 2 or maybe 3 helps you get down to one of 2 foundations. One is a drive from fear and one is a drive from love. Now, I'm a big fan of the idea of all feelings are feelings that teach you something. They're feelings that are there for a purpose. And all of them are a part of our lives and a part of the divine gift that we have been given as a part of ourselves. But the question really becomes, like, if you're choosing a choice from love, know that. If you're choosing a choice from fear, know that. Understand fully what are the foundations of the choices you're making. Why are you making them? Any quick questions about that? Normally I would make us do this, but we're running tight on time and I want us to get to the next thing. So, Rabbi.
Oops. So we are just perfect time wise. So if you want to go back to the slide, give people just a chance. If there are a few responses, and people can also give them as chat. Or if have questions.
Well, first and foremost, does anybody have any questions about one exercise or the other?
Or about the texts?
So the 5 whys are a way to dig down into why you're choosing a choice that you're choosing. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I see what I'm doing and I don't necessarily love it, or I love what I'm doing and I want to understand more, like, why I love it and what's happening here. Those are opportunities for the 5 whys. Or if you have, a path that diverges in the yellow woods, the question then becomes, like, which path do you take? And sometimes when both paths are more or less equal, doing an exercise like the 5 whys helps to clarify for you how to make that decision and what decision is the right decision in that moment with the knowledge that you have. Does that make sense? You can come off mute if you'd like.
Why don't you give us some examples?
So, let's think about career choice, right? So why would you choose what you choose? And spending time not just using the what, right? Like, what's your instantaneous result? What do you want to say? But then using that result from the intuition exercise to then dig down and be like, okay, like, I'm trying to choose between, I don't know, finance and becoming a doctor. Why do you really want to do this? And why do you really want to do that? And digging down and understanding, what is your motivation deep down? What emotional motivators do you have that drive you forward in that choice? that then enables you to have more grit as you go through the difficulties that come with any path, right? Like one isn't more right than the other. It's really just a question of what's happening for you in this moment, in this time, and what are you bringing into that? And creating a depth of self-awareness will enable you to choose better choices for yourself. Does that make sense? I can only see a couple of faces, so I'm getting a couple of nods.
And my sense with the 5 whys is that if you have to keep asking why, you have to push yourself a little bit harder and further each time with some of those different questions that Rabbi Ben-Shoshan was saying of why, it's not just, well, why do you want to be a rabbi? Well, I want to help people. Why do you want to help people to make the world a better place? Why do you with each question,
how does this make a better place? Yeah. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
No, you can't stop and take an easy out of a simple answer. Each time pushes you a little bit harder to go a little bit deeper and really reflect on what you're pushing off from. What is that foundation of why you're making that choice or why you're going that direction?
Absolutely. It's creating an understanding of the foundation of yourself, right? If we stick to the theology of like, you are divine inspired and there's a spark of the divine within you. If we're sticking to that theology, then digging down in order to find that spark and figure out what puzzle piece that spark is supposed to be is a divine aspect of the work that all of us have as human beings.
And so this really fits with the Omer as and take Noah. I'll get to that comment in just a second. What a great one. But with Noah, because he his first step was that he had a very strong foundation, knew what he wanted to do, and built the ark and was able to save humanity. By the end of the story, he loses that sense of foundation and drive and direction and freaks out that there's no one left and plants that vineyard and gets drunk. And so he is a great example of that, of having a foundation and then losing that foundation. And this reflection is great for the counting of the Omer because this is what we're supposed to do. That idea of how do we have these moments of different kinds of reflection based on these different midot, on these different values. So I'm going to give you, as you're kind of starting to think about that, I'm going to give you a couple of other really powerful illustrations of the idea of a Yesod, of a foundation. So one of the things we're talking about is physical foundations, right? How do you physically have something that anchors you, that allows you to bear weight? What are some of those emotional foundations? And then a really big question, what happens when our foundations move or when we shift? And so we wanted to give you an incredible image of a foundation that was very much focused on a shift that is so vital to Jewish life. So please tell us in the chat, or you can do or raise your hand, how many of you have been to Israel before? So I see a few hands going up. In Israel, in Jerusalem, in the Jewish quarter, there's a place called the Broad Wall, which, remember that Jerusalem is built layer upon layer upon layer layer upon layer of inhabitants. That's really not the right word for it, but you know what I mean. So each generation is building on the next generation. In this street, in the Jewish quarter, it's open up, and there is a wall in the bottom with a meter stick to show you how big this wall is. And you could look at it and say, oh, look, that's the foundation of a building. However, it's not just any building. That is the broad wall from the time of Hezekiah, who was the king, and Isaiah the prophet. And this is around 722. And so at this time, the Assyrians coming out of Mesopotamia are conquering the northern kingdom of Israel, and they are headed towards the kingdom of Jerusalem and our southern kingdom of Judah with its capital in Jerusalem. They wipe out the northern kingdom. The 10 northern tribes disappear. They are conquered and they disappear in history, and they then go to besiege the city of Jerusalem, the Assyrians do. And at the leading up to this, Hezekiah, who was judged to be righteous in God's sight, has expanded the walls of Jerusalem, strengthened the walls of Jerusalem. And if you have been to Hezekiah's tunnel, you know that he is set up so that water can come under the wall, and they have a source of water inside Jerusalem in case of a siege. And it's really a rather extraordinary engineering feat. So Jerusalem is able to hold out. The Assyrians eventually, because of, and we hear 5 different reasons why they left, eventually give up their siege and depart, and Judah and Jerusalem survive in 722. Because of this wall that you can see inside the street of Jerusalem, and because of Hezekiah's tunnel, that you can actually walk in underneath Jerusalem. Flash forward to 586. What happens in 586? Curious to see if anyone can type that fast. They did not block off the river. We have another invasion. We have another invasion from Mesopotamia. This time it's the Babylonians who've defeated the Assyrians, and they don't block off the river. They just break down the walls. And so they are able to destroy Jerusalem. They destroy the first temple, and they take the people of Judah and Jerusalem into exile and take them back to Babylon. Now, here's the significance. Actually, it's the destruction of the first temple. Second temple is the Romans. Here's the significance of it. Between 722, when the northern kingdom disappears, and 586, when the Judah is taken away, something is shifted in the people of Israel that they don't need to be rooted to the spot of Jerusalem. God is not in that place. They are able to take God with them on the way, and they're able to tune into finding God in a rhythm of time that isn't dependent on being in a particular place. And so you see a whole shift of paradigm between 722 and 586 that allows the people of Israel to give up their foundations of place and reset themselves with a foundation of time. Okay, and I think we're ready for the next piece, another set of questions. Did you want to share those questions, Rabbi Ben-Shoshan?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about them. So one of the, as we see from this very illustrative story from our historical past, is that certain kinds of foundations can shift from one foundation to the other, right? We have the capacity to shift in the face of tragedy from one foundation to another. Not that we are abandoning certain values, but that we are able to rechange our focus and to shift from, as the environment changes, like we talked about before, sometimes one foundation, like a square foundation, is best, and sometimes a pillar foundation is best, right? Having these opportunities to really think through how we establish our own foundations and how we can shift through them is part of what has ensured the Jewish people's survival, and also is part of what ensures our own personal, mental, and spiritual survival in the context of Midot and Musar and the Omer. So some of these questions enable us to really focus in on what is most important about our foundations, like our values. So, where is your alignment with your foundations, with your chosen values? And then also what pulls you away from those foundations, and really trying to create some personal reflection in order to understand that. And these questions are meant to help us align, what does it mean to dig down into your foundation, and help us to figure out where are we pulled away from that, and where is that less effective for us, and where can we reestablish or recenter ourselves onto our foundations. Any questions? It's hard spiritual work, and we're like fitting it tightly into a brief amount of time. So it's it's the work for the whole week. Rabbi, do you want to lead us in a study of Oseh Shalom in order to
Absolutely.
help us
So
create this kind of alignment? And also
just to close us out, usually when we're talking about foundation, you think about something under you. But here's the beautiful and powerful thing about Jewish tradition. We say it all the time, a text that talks about a foundation that's not necessarily under us, but that's around us. And it's the text of Oseh Shalom Bimromav, of Oseh Shalom. So Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'al Kol Yoshe Tevel V'imru Amen, maker of Shalom. And when we say shalom, we don't just mean peace. We mean that order, that wholeness, that harmony, perfection that's out there in the high heavens. As we go out and we see the cycles of the creation and the universe around us, bring that sense of shalom, that sense of wholeness and completeness and perfection and peace and harmony, everything in sync, working together to us, to all Israel and all the world. And so this is one of those things in Jewish life that as much and we've had these wonderful questions getting us to think about how those values from inside of us. This is one of those opportunities to tune in to the order, to peace, to harmony, to something that's in sync outside of us, to find that rhythm so that we find that foundation and are able to find our way through this time of the Omer. And I didn't know if you wanted to add something to that, Rabbi Ben-Shoshan.
No, I think that's absolutely perfect. Right? We were talking about how the idea of our foundations can shift and they can be one shape or another, but also they can be all around us in this way.
And they can go from within to without.
Indeed. So we're now at time, just a couple minutes past. And we wanted to thank you so much for spending the time learning with us, for participating in this series, and for really enabling connection all across North America.
Any other last questions or thoughts?
Thank you.
And so I will send out also the link for the Tikkun Leil Shavuot. And we will have Rabbi Edwin Goldberg and Rabbi Neil Katz next week to round out our counting of the Omer. And a big thank you to my colleague for joining me and giving us a chance to teach.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And thank you so much. I hope that this gives everyone enough spiritual homework for the whole week leading us into next week's session.